In this programme, we're on a journey to the far north of Senegal in West Africa. Look out into the distance, you'll see mostly desert. Go further north and you'll arrive in Mauritania and the Sahara. And yet this is where I've asked a journalist named Jack Thompson to go in search of a story. On the face of it, a tough assignment because, as you can imagine, it looks like such an unpromising place to find food.
So we've been driving up for 5 hours from Dakar, the Senegal's capital, up to Saint-Louis, which is right in the north of Senegal. Dry, arid terrain, very sandy landscapes, only the occasional herder riding along with their cattle and their goats and their sheep.
But if you know where to look, and Jack does, there is a food story here. It's one with growing importance to all of us here in the UK. And it's connected with water because, as Jack headed further north, on the horizon appeared a huge river along with a 40-kilometre lake and a network of canals.
It's just amazing how we go from these really arid landscapes to suddenly bursting into life. You can hear the sounds of birds diving, you can see beautiful water lilies that have just blossomed, pelicans flying over, and behind us there are these huge canals that have been built to feed all of the farms around us.
Farms which in turn are feeding more of us. This winter, if you visit a British supermarket to buy corn on the cob or radishes, spring onions or beans, chances are that food will have been grown in West Africa.
It's astonishing to go to one farm that in February is producing 60% of the UK's radishes and 50% of our green beans, and a farm next door is producing 30% of our corn on the cob. You know, it makes you realise what the food system looks like.
In the coming months, a workforce of around 7,000 Senegalese women and men will plant, pick and pack a significant amount of the fresh produce eaten in Britain. We thought it might be worth asking, who's behind this supply chain? Is it a good thing? And who is benefiting? In our search for answers, we'll hear from Senegalese farm workers. And we'll be following the fresh produce on its 6-day journey by sea from West Africa to the UK, hearing from the British businesses overseeing these farms.
This is the first part of the process where we take the sweetcorn high up in the air. Sweetcorn doesn't like to climb, it knocks itself.
We are reaching the point now where British will cost more than Senegalese. The consumer will decide whether they want to buy British or whether they want to buy imported.
And hopefully, by the end of this programme, you'll be able to take a view on the questions we're asking and weighing up the pros and cons of this growing supply chain from Africa.
British horticulture is in decline, British food production is in decline, and there's no commentary about it. It's staggering.
For me, it's a very good thing. The community have their land with water, and youth and women have job there. They have job.
Our reporter on this story, Jack Thompson, is based in the capital, Dakar, and joins me now. Before we hear from the farms, Jack, give us some of the basics on Senegal itself. What's important to know?
So if you looked at a map, Senegal is on the westernmost tip of Africa. It has a population just under 20 million people, and it's the only country in West Africa to have never had a coup. It straddles a tropical zone, so in the south it's lush and green, and in the north it borders the Sahara Desert, and it's a region called the Sahel. 95% of the population are Muslim, so you'll often hear the call to prayer. People wear long tunics and colourful dresses that are called boubous. It's a fairly chaotic place, but people are kind and patient, and their national value is called Teranga, which in Wolof means hospitality. So people often invite you to eat, which they did many times on our journey.
You went from the capital Dakar to the north of the country. Is it correct to say it's a journey that's effectively in search of water?
As we drive from the capital, Dakar. We follow this old railway line that the French built in the 1800s for transporting peanuts. And the landscape changes from palm trees and ancient baobab forests to basically just sand with wispy acacias. And after 7 hours, as we approached the border with Mauritania, its northerly neighbor, explodes into green. And that's because of the river that separates these two countries and that feeds into this bigger lake.
And this isn't just about one farm, but two. And that's because two major supermarket suppliers, G's Fresh and Barfoot's, both have a presence in northern Senegal.
We went to two large-scale farms that supply UK supermarkets. By the river that separates Mauritania and Senegal is SCL, which is a joint venture with Barfoot's. And this stands for Société de Culture Légumière, vegetable growing company, if translated literally. It grows sweet corn, green beans and chilies over 1,500 hectares, employing nearly 7,000 people at peak season. Further to the east, by a lake fed by the same river, is West Africa Farms, run by G's, growing spring onions, radishes and beans over 500 hectares, employing 2,000 people.
The first farm Jack visited was SCL's, where he met its founder and CEO, Michael Laurent. Now in his 60s, it was an interest in travel and agriculture decades ago that led him to northern Senegal.
Why we choose here Senegal? Senegal, you have plenty of water. I think something like 85% of the water from Senegal River finish in the sea. We have land. We have a lot of people who are seeking for a job. We have sunshine. And we have a very good logistic by sea freight. And also we had a strong democracy and a good market, because the UK consumer and all the European consumers, they look for fresh produce during the winter. And during winter, it's the best time for the year for us to produce and export.
Michael Laurent realised West Africa could be an important source of food for the UK 20 years ago. At that time, much of the fresh produce sold in supermarkets during the winter came from the Americas and involved either weeks of travel or air freight. Senegal is only 6 days away by ship, and so Michael took his computer and went in search of land.
First, I look on Google Earth. Google Earth is a fantastic tool, so I look at the area. The farm where we are, there was nothing before we started. It was the bush.
He realised that along the Senegal River and around the lake was something of an agricultural Goldilocks zone, the ideal combination of water, land and labour.
First, you have to be not too far from the sea, because we have a very good climate. You feel the wind today. It's not hot, so it's coming from the sea. So we are 10 kilometers from the sea, so very good microclimate. You have to be not too far from a road, which is the case. We have a main road not too far from the port. Even if it's Dakar, it's something acceptable. And then you have to find to have the agreement of the villages. So first step, I look where there was some land available, and then I sat down with villagers and to try to explain them what was the project. Do they agree for us to get the land and to start a business, to start to grow, to start a farm.
The land remains under government ownership. Businesses, including SCL, apply for a lease to produce food and then buy licenses to access water, a resource which is overseen by a local management committee. With this in place, Michael Laurent started growing sweet corn, first on 70 hectares of land, which has since expanded to the current 1,500. That's roughly 2,000 football pitches, which produces 55 million cobs of corn each year, all destined for UK supermarkets. And Jack got to meet some of the thousands of people paid to pick the sweet corn.
Right now, I'm in the middle of a field of baby corn. and it's high above me. It goes over my head as far as the eye can see. But it's 2 hectares of baby corn that is going to arrive in the UK in 12 days. And so now we're following Diarra and her team, and we're just going to walk behind them. It's midday and it's hot, but Diarra and her team are covered by tall stalks and leaves. They comb through the corn, stripping the stalks of its cobs and putting them into a soft bucket on their backs whilst joking and talking together. When it's full, they unload it into a trailer where it's taken back to the pack house.
And Jack, you spoke with one of the pickers, a woman named Diarra. What did she tell you about her job?
Il n'y a pas de problème. Tu gagnes de l'argent, tu gagnes de...
Generally, she was very grateful for the work, that she had started off as a picker and she'd been promoted a few times. And, you know, in a region where there's little to no work, this was a good thing.
So produit 4 et puis 5. Chaque matin,
there was no work. You have to imagine here there was absolutely nothing. People was no work for anybody, and they wanted electricity, they wanted water, they wanted a lot of needs. We helped them on all this subject on education. We built a lot of schools around. We built. We have a lot of health care programs.
Attracted by the availability of workers, more agribusinesses from around the world are arriving in northern Senegal. Someone who's been following this process over decades is Ardo Sow, first as a campaigner on land rights, now as a member of the local government.
If you take your car and you go in each plot of land, you see a flag of a foreign country. France, you have Italy, Americans, Indians, Saudi Arabians. And I used to say, okay, this is the new way of colonization.
Used to say, because in the past, the arrival of a business in the region was a top-down affair conducted through central government. But in more recent times, as is the case of the farms we're visiting, it involves ongoing communication and negotiation with local communities.
The first good thing is to have a dialogue directly with the community, the local community, because how investors used to do is to go through government, and now investors have this discussion with the communities and find agreement with the communities. And this is how things work. They have their land. The community are also have also their land with water. And youth and women also have job there. Even if they are not really well paid, they have job.
The point he mentions about access to land and water we'll come to later, but let's address the issue of pay. In the UK, 2/3 of the cost of producing a pack of corn on the cob or a bunch of spring onions is labour. In Senegal, it's less than 1/3. And pay came up in a conversation Jack had with one of the pickers at SCL.
Miguel is standing with us, and she said if he could help, that they could increase their salaries because times are difficult and Senegal is expensive. I appreciate the bravery to say that in front of the boss. It was quite an audacious but deft interaction. She went from profuse thanks for the opportunity and then shifted to asking for a raise because her family needed more to get by. And this reflected many conversations we had in communities around pay. The majority of the 7,000 workers are day workers with little social security, earning 2,500 sefa a day, which is around £3. And often workers will be providing for the whole family. And so when someone says, 2,500 is not enough, I have a family, I have a mother and father to feed. It's also important to say that inflation is pretty rampant But what this picker didn't know, and this is what Michael followed with in English, that she's about to receive a raise due to a government increase in the national minimum wage of 30%. And that means her monthly salary will go from £60 to £82.69.
I think it's a fair payment. Of course, it doesn't look a lot. It is not a lot, but this is what we can propose here, because most of the work is done manually, and the margin is very low. We're in a risky business because you may have a lot of problems occurring, like too hot, too cold, problem of logistic. But yes, at the end you finish with a margin which is not very exciting sometimes, and we have to remain competitive also.
And it's likely to get even more competitive. More agri-businesses are looking to get access to West Africa in search of water, labour and land.
It can be a lot of Spanish companies, because in Spain you may have some problems also of production. Morocco, a lot of Moroccans are looking, because Morocco there is a lack of water, it's a big problem in Morocco. Here there is it's funny, we are close to the desert, but you have plenty of water because of the Senegal River. So that's why you have a lot of country people are looking at opportunities here.
Currently, would you like more land to grow more produce, or are you happy on the amount that you're on?
We always look at more land. Now we are, because of the market, the demand for other products is increasing. So that's why we try to get new land. We are growing at the size of the market.
The reason why more companies are looking to places like Senegal, to West Africa.
This is Mike Knowles, Managing Director of FruitNet Europe, an expert on the global fresh produce trade.
The competition for land in the more traditional sourcing regions, for example in the Mediterranean, has become more intense. There's much more demand being placed on water supply, on the supply of labour force, and all of that contributes to rising costs in these traditional producing regions. There's also been a push to reduce air freight, so there's a sustainability angle as well, to reduce the carbon footprint. And West Africa, with an increasing number of shipping connections, can offer a much lower carbon footprint than other places further afield.
Mike Knowles. One of the reasons we started making this programme was a comment about Senegal made by Henry Dimbleby. Under the previous government, Henry wrote the National Food Strategy, and he's also visited the farms in northern Senegal. Earlier this year on the food programme, he argued that if we increase our dependence on West Africa for food, there are going to be significant risks as well as opportunities. When I caught up with him more recently, he was even more certain of that position.
Taking fresh water that's about to go into the sea and restoring incredibly destroyed grazing. I mean, it's completely destroyed soil that had been grazed. That is clearly a good use of water and a good use of productive land. But what struck me most was thinking about what is going to happen as climate deteriorates. In the last 2 years, we've had the first shock. So West Africa and coffee and cocoa, first time that climate has just wiped out, has completely transformed the market.
And which is why we've seen record-breaking prices in those commodities.
And that has been a real wake-up call, because everyone's been talking about it and we now see it happening. If you have a climate shock in those countries, it just seemed, I cannot imagine a world in which the Senegalese government doesn't take over that land and use it to feed its own people. So if you have climate shocks elsewhere in the world, they will definitely impact the UK. You could argue the UK could definitely get by without eating radishes, green beans and corn on the cob in February, and it becomes a political thing. So, we know from 2023 how freaked out people got because we had some bad weather in Morocco and we had a shortage of lettuce and everyone went completely mad. So politically, I think that would be very problematic, and I think it is going to happen.
Let's go back to the sweet corn being grown in northern Senegal. After picking, it went by truck to Dakar, then onto a container ship, and then 6 days out at sea. I went to see it arrive at its next destination.
This is the first part of the process where we take the sweet corn high up in the air. Sweet corn doesn't like
Near
to
Bognor Regis, on the south coast, there's a huge processing and packing site owned by Barfoot's, SCL's joint partner in Senegal. And there I met group manager Julian Marks.
on a sweet corn saw, which effectively is a conveyor belt with two circular saws.
After the containers filled with the corn arrived, we watched as they were transferred to a processing area. At this stage, the cobs still have their husks on.
It's got the silks at the top, it's got the green husk that is effectively the protection, and then it's got the shank at the bottom, and we describe the shank as something like the sort of engine for that cob in terms of its life. It's where a lot of energy is stored, and keeping that shank on through its transit to the UK means that it's got that energy to keep it alive.
Barfoot's has an entire factory dedicated just to sweet corn. Busy with workers and stainless steel machines, it involves 4 fast-moving lines capable of processing thousands of cobs a minute.
The British have got enormous appetite for sweet corn, and over the years the plant breeders have made sweeter cobs with a more tender kernel on them, which has appealed to the consumer. And when I started in the business 20 years ago, we were selling probably 25 million pieces of sweet corn a year, and we're now selling 150 to 160 million pieces of sweet corn a year. So a product to consumers that they want to eat all through the year, rather than as just a summer treat from a barbecue.
The workforce in Senegal makes the winter supply of corn on the cob possible in the UK. That's the clear benefit to Barfoot's and supermarket customers. But what, I asked Julian Marks, did he think were the benefits for the Senegalese?
The Senegalese population is a very, very young population, and we have brought the opportunity for young people to complete their education, because we've helped with the physical capacity of schools. There's no shortage of teachers in Senegal, but there's a shortage of places for pupils to sit. And beyond that, the development of medical facilities on all of our farms, driving healthcare for our staff on our farms, but also in the communities around those farms, I think has been transformative. And doing what many would see as quite simple exercises, such as we take a team of French surgeons out every year from Paris who come out and they carry out operations for people in the community who perhaps have some physical birth defect, or they have scarring from a burn or something like that, where some simple surgery can completely transform their lives. We run that program every year, and that has been very well received as well.
And yet, at the same time, people listening might be thinking, well, surely this is also a model in which we get to have cheaper food based around cheap labour.
It's a very good argument that labour rates are lower in these countries that we work in. I suppose the counter to that is that employment wasn't available at the inception of the business. So 20 years ago, those people were not employed, those jobs weren't available. Now they are employed within their national wage structures, and depending on the skill of the role that they're carrying out. The balance for us is that, yes, we have to ensure that they are being paid a living wage and being paid properly within their national legislation, and then we have to ensure that we've actually got a product that lands in the UK that is affordable and that consumers can afford to buy and continue to buy.
Do you think the ambition should be more than that, that actually if they are supplying food to Britain, that they should be some of the definitely the best paid agricultural workers in Senegal, or even in West Africa?
And I think that if you went and looked at those rates of pay, they probably are well up there in terms of their national and probably their comparators in Mauritania or Mali or in other countries. And that is the competition at retail is always the critical area. But over the 20-year period, actually, the value or the price paid for a twin pack of sweet corn has actually been driven down over the 20-year period.
We're paying less.
You're actually paying less for it now.
Would you like to be rewarding the workforce in Africa with higher wages, but actually the price on the shelf is not allowing you to do that?
The pressure is right the way through the supply chain. Margins are extraordinarily tight. If you take the probably 35 companies within our cohort over the last few years, the margin that they've been making is really so small that you would have to ask yourself why companies are prepared to take the risk.
You can't put a figure on that margin?
Many companies in the last 3 years have actually been in negative territory.
This whole exercise in trying to understand the supply chain from Senegal began because of a comment Henry Dimbleby made on the food programme earlier in the year, which was asking if there was a future climate event, is the Senegalese government going to allow this food to leave West Africa? Is this a supply chain that we can depend on?
As a nation, we are heavily reliant on these crops coming in through the winter. There is no opportunity to extend or to grow these crops in the UK or outside of the UK summer. And in reality, if those things happened, we would seek other places in the world to grow, and currently we are constantly seeking other places to where that maybe are geographically more suited with the changing climate and with changing politics. We're always working on projects to do that. But Henry is right that perhaps the long-term implication will be that the British have to revert to seasonal food and winter root vegetables. But I think that with innovation and continued investment that can be avoided.
On the subject of tight margins in the fresh produce sector, I asked the organisation which represents the major supermarkets, the British Retail Consortium, for its position. Sophie DeSalis, their spokesperson, told me that following a long period of high food price inflation, their priority has been and remains keeping prices as low as possible for customers.
We are seeing food inflation decrease. This was 3.7% year on year in October, but food inflation remains considerably high, especially for fresh produce. It's a competitive market, and continued commitment to affordability is something that our members are keen to stress.
And on the point Julian Marks was making about the impact of private investment in West Africa, there is some additional context that should be added. This is the recent cuts to development aid made by some of the world's major economies. The canal network in northern Senegal, for example, originated as a project by USAID, the development agency shut down by the Trump administration in July. Meanwhile, the UK government announced earlier this year it was slashing foreign aid in order to increase defence spending. A Foreign Office impact assessment found that the biggest cuts would be in Africa. The farming businesses are very clear. They're in Senegal to produce food and make money, but they are also convinced that they can play a crucial development role. To find out why, let's return to Jack's journey.
So we left SEL, and while West Africa Farms is only 40 kilometres to the east as the crow flies, we couldn't take the sandy bush roads because we weren't in a 4x4, so we had to do a 100-kilometre round trip to West Africa Farms. This is fed by Lac de Guiers, which is fed by the river, and this is the largest freshwater lake in Senegal.
Jack was travelling to meet Derek Wilkinson, a managing director at G's Fresh, which set up West Africa Farms in 2011. As with Barfoot's and SCL, it has also been attempting to turn an arid landscape into fields of food, in its case by building new canals from the lake.
where we are now on the farm, this has only actually been in production for about 3 years, so it's still what we call relatively new soil, and you can see what it's like, what we've started off with this. It's almost pure sand. We are growing in a desert.
Farming in the desert, how did you first think that it would be possible, and what are the challenges of doing it?
Yeah, well, we're not the first people to farm in the desert. It happens across Africa and other parts of the world. But the key is nutrition. So we need plenty of water, which we've got, very sustainable source of water from the lake. But nutrition is absolutely key. So we're, as well as using a lot of conventional fertiliser initially, we're having to grow a lot of cover crops to improve the soil organic matter.
In its deal with the Senegalese government and local communities, G's gets to grow spring onions, beans and radishes for the UK, while at the same time providing farmers and local pastoralists with resources they need to produce food.
We're near to the Pula community, and this is actually land that we've done various deals on with the Pula community for us to grow crops on. During the rainy season, the grass all grows, and then that provides them with fodder for their feed for their cattle to last them throughout the year. But when it gets to this time of the year, we're just waiting for the rains to come now. They run short of feed. So we have an agreement with them as part of the deal for having the land, where we grow 20 hectares a year of millet for them to come in and harvest, cut it by hand, take it away on donkeys and carts to feed to their cattle. And you can just seen behind us that they're just waiting to come in at the moment, and then they'll be in here shortly to take the fodder away this day. And we'll cut this is 20 hectares, and we'll cut it 2 times. So this will be cut down, and then it will actually regrow over a matter of a few weeks. So effectively they've got 40 hectares of quite high value fodder, because you can see it's growing about 6 feet high.
Another feature of the agreement is that on one side of the canals bringing water in from the lake, G's grows its food for export, while on the other, local farmers gain access to a new supply of water to supply the domestic market.
It started off as 100 hectares, now that's 250 hectares, which the local community farmers are farming themselves. So that has been a great success.
And they couldn't have done that without you, basically, because they needed a lot of machinery.
Yeah, well, the lake is 1 kilometre away from the farm here, so there was a lot of small farms around the edge of the lake, but the land up here is what we call the dry land. The big thing we did was digging the canal, and then we opened up the land for them to farm, and then they've slowly started farming in a small way, and then they've expanded and keep expanding their own businesses. And that's our agreement with the government, is we're exporting a minimum of 80% of our produce, and then we're helping local farmers. So they're building their business to supply the Senegalese market and to feed their own population, and we export, so we're therefore bringing currency, helping the balance of payments for Senegal.
Do you think it's a resilient supply chain?
Yeah, it's very resilient. Something could change, on political situation, but there's no signs of that at the moment. We're still investing here, so we're confident, as are other businesses. So I think it's got a fantastic future, and Senegal could produce a lot more food.
Yeah.
For I'm not talking about just for the UK. I'm talking about feeding itself and for feeding other parts of Africa with this water source and the climate. And it's providing a lot of work here in an underdeveloped country. And it's providing opportunity for people to earn money. It's kept, since we've been here, the number of people living in this area has increased, because previously, when there was nothing for them to do, lots of the younger people you see out here in the field, they would have had to leave to go and find work or go to Dakar, and even some of them make the perilous journey to get away from the country to go into Europe. So it's kept communities together. We've actually found some very good leaders in the business, and we've also developed some leaders. So we've sent a lot of people to the UK for training.
Okay, here is the offloading, where we offloading the product from the field after we bring it on.
One of the young leaders on the farm is Abby.
Come from to the university, and Now I get from training from UK. I go to UK 4 times and back to West Africa. I get some opportunity from West Africa farm to grow up. So we need to flow up from the customer.
But what of the future? And also Henry Dimbleby's climate concerns. Senegal's population is projected to grow more than 60% by 2025, resulting in well over 10 million more mouths to feed. It's one reason why the future of its own food supply is a major political issue. Back to community advisor Ardo Sao.
The new government, the objective is food sovereignty for Senegal. This is in the plan. But it doesn't mean that we are not also have target or objective to export things that we don't need here. But how we can align all those objective. This is the point. In the term of climate change, you have seen that impact of the climate change everywhere in Senegal and particularly in this area of Senegal. And it means in the next 10, 20, 15 years, maybe we will not have all this amount of water in this area if you are not careful.
For now, food is flowing into the UK from Africa. Sandfield Farms in the Vale of Evesham near Worcester, a subsidiary of G's Fresh, is where the spring onions usually arrive from West Africa to process and pack. During the winter, it receives 1.5 million bunches each week from Senegal, 40% of the UK's total supply.
So from here, we deliver to the supermarket depots, where then the supermarkets then pick the products and take it out to the stores.
But on the day I visited, the spring onions were all from Egypt. A problem with shipping meant the harvest in Senegal was going to waste.
Ships were meant to be delivering bananas into Senegal, which then reload with our produce to come to Europe. They were held up because the Senegalese government stopped the import of bananas for 2 or 3 weeks, which was when their own crop was ready. So this is about protecting the farmers in Senegal to allow them to get their crops harvested and sold.
This was made worse by strike action in the port of Antwerp.
But now, although those strikes are finished, they've caused major disruption to the shipping lines. I think at one point last week there were 200 ships waiting to unload in Antwerp.
Derek says that seen in the context of months of supply, this is more of a blip than a breakdown in the supply chain. But it's the type of scenario food systems expert Tim Lang was describing in his report on supply chain resilience, published earlier this year. A comprehensive report that explored the impact of everything from future conflicts to cyber attacks on supermarkets.
We're certainly in a time of coming shocks. And indeed, look at what happened when Marks and Spencer's and the Co-op went down. It affected some areas really in a big way. These were getting little wake-up calls. And why turn to other people for all the year round in very, very complicated logistics systems using a high amount of energy, high amounts of trucking, boating and building of new logistics infrastructure when just simpler and more diverse and more seasonal diets work.
Tim Lang also believes that as the farms in West Africa expand, UK farms will experience decline.
Literally last night I was talking with a former spring onion grower in the Midlands who told me in great detail how his family enterprise has gradually been squeezed out of existence. Couldn't do it. Labour costs, long-termness, the supermarkets wanting regular produce, which would have meant them having to go international. So there's been a gradual filtration of small businesses ending up either having to be big, like the 2 big players in Senegal, or get out.
Derek Wilkinson of G's doesn't dispute more consolidation in the sector is underway, but he does disagree that this means greater risk and less resilience. And he points to the standby options they had ready during the shipping disruption.
We de-risk the business by having a split. So in case of spring onions, we are taking spring onions from Senegal, Egypt, and a small amount from Morocco. So we always have a spread of risk, and generally things don't change overnight. We'd react over a period of time to any major changes.
What would you say to people listening to this thinking, can more of this be grown in the UK?
We are invested in UK horticulture. We're heavily invested in it, and we're continue to invest for the future. Our UK farming is our bedrock of the business. Senegal is really about providing that year-round continuity. We are giving the consumer choice. I mean, consumers don't have to buy imported fruit and vegetables, but they choose to.
But there are reasons why it's likely we will see even more produce from Senegal arriving into the UK. For one, those labour costs we heard about earlier.
There's no doubt about it. Since Brexit, employing seasonal labour in the UK has become more difficult and it's become more expensive. I mean, we're fortunate at the moment we've got the seasonal workers scheme, but it is costing a lot more than it used to. In Senegal, of course, we've got the advantage that we have got very high unemployment in Senegal and lots of people in relatively close proximity to the farm. That is a major advantage of Senegal.
This partly explains a conversation Derek had with reporter Jack Thompson in Senegal. Jack's visit to the farm took place during the summer. Even so, spring onions were about to be exported to the UK.
We are reaching the point now where it's same cost for us to grow spring onions here and send them to the UK as grow them in the UK, which is why you've seen harvest today. We are in the UK season now, but we're still doing here about 15% of our production is coming from Senegal in the summer season. That is a significant shift, but of course, the consumer will decide whether they want to buy British or whether they want to buy imported, and we as a business will produce what the consumer wants, but we will reach a point where British will cost more than Senegalese.
In this programme, we've covered some of the questions being raised by this relatively new supply chain. We featured a range of opinions. And as you've just heard from one of the suppliers, it's now for us to take this information on board, because ultimately, we do get to decide